Welcome to the teaching of Nothing Happened on the Cross. There are various beliefs regarding the device used for the execution of YAHUSHUA. We could say that the Hebrew alphabet letter for T is shaped like a cross and it means covenant, so it must have been a cross. But it's not as simple as that. What YAHUSHUA said would cancel that theory out. We'll get to what he said later. The device could have been any of the 9 devices that the Romans used for executions. A simple upright pole, a cross, or an actual living tree. It doesn't matter what device it is. We'll have a look at what device it is, and you'll find out how important it is to know what device it is. Let's look at what device it is by looking at all of the possible factors at the time of the execution of YAHUSHUA. Firstly, let's look at the situation of the Jewish religion on the day of the execution. It was the day before the annual Shabbat. All work had to be completed by 12 p.m. At 3 p.m., the second Tamid lamb had to be killed. Mashiach had to hang on a tree. No bodies may be on the tree after sunset. Because of these reasons, time plus the number of people being executed at the same time was the main factors to determine the device for executing Mashiach. His execution was a hurry-up affair. We know that Yeshua was on the execution device from 12 till 3 p.m. and it's obvious that these times were strictly adhered to under the Pharisees' request. The commonly used longest method was when a hole had to be dug for a long stake to be planted into the ground, and ladders were required to secure the person and crossbeam to the long stake, which would prolong the death for days. The commonly used shortest method would be when a person was nailed and or strapped to a tree. Death could be quick depending on the position of the arms. Based on this, it seems as if Mashiach was executed on the tree. But before we accept that, let's look at the scientific or medical cause of death when hanging on these execution devices. The most popular thought is that Mashiach would have died of suffocation. The position of his arms would have determined whether he did die of suffocation and whether he died quickly, as we have already established that his death had to be quickly. Professor Frederick T. Zurbi from America performed extensive experiments to test the theory of death on a Roman execution device. He conducted 2 variations of execution, one with a superdanium, which is a wooden block upon which the person's feet would be on for support, and one without a superdanium. These experiments concluded that a man on a cross with his arms in a horizontal position would not suffocate to death, with or without a superdanium. Dr. Hermann Mutter from Austria carried out an experiment by strapping students' arms vertically above their heads and suspending them in midair. Within minutes, the students grew pale, their lung capacity and blood pressure dropped significantly, and their pulse rates increased. Mutter concluded suffocation would occur in minutes if they were not able to stand and rest. No support devices were used to allow the students to relieve the pressure on their lungs to enable them to breathe. According to the scripture, the criminal's legs were broken in order to hasten death. The experiments would verify that YAHUSHUA and the men's arms must have been in a vertical position for a quick death. For a quick execution, the most likely position of the legs would have been in a bent position, with the feet nailed and or tied to the execution device. Without the superdanium, the pain and suffering would be greater. The legs would be broken below the knees, and without being able to support their body weight, death would have been in minutes due to suffocation. Neither of the men could have been on a cross, because they would not have died within minutes, and their death could have taken hours and possibly days if they had no support for the legs. Therefore, their arms had to be in a vertical position. Let's look at the other common picture that we have of Yeshua carrying a cross. And the question is, can a man carry a cross? It is inconceivable to believe that YAHUSHUA, who had been subjected to extensive beatings and whippings, could have carried a fully assembled cross that would have weighed 100 to over 150 kilograms. It could have only been the crossbeam, which would have weighed approximately 40 to 50 kilograms, which because of his weak condition he battled to carry, and Simon of Cyrene had to carry the crossbeam up to Golgotha. YAHUSHUA was in no physical position to carry a cross. So why would Yeshua say that we must carry our cross? It would make him to be a liar and a hypocrite if he tells us to carry our cross and he did not. The truth is that he did not tell us to carry our cross. He used the word Stauros figuratively for death. What he actually said and meant was, "And whoever does not obtain his death and follow after me is not worthy of me. The one finding his life shall lose it, and the one losing his life on account of me shall find it." By now it's quite obvious that the original word of Yahuwah was perverted. The word refers to those that pervert the word as adulterers and whores. The question that you need to ask yourself is, are you an adulterous whore? If your answer is yes, then this and my other teachings will help you to stop being an adulterous whore. We know that there was a crossbeam, but we have no evidence that YAHUSHUA was nailed to the crossbeam, or the crossbeam was hung from an execution device. The quickest way to execute the three men would be to strap their wrists and ankles to the execution device and to nail their hands and feet to the device, without a crossbeam. So what was the execution device? Maybe John's mathematical question might give us the answer. Before we have a look at the mathematical question that John poses in John 19, verses 31 to 33, let's consider the mathematical possibilities of three crosses. The crossbeams were at least 2 meters long, and if the crossbeams were next to each other, then there would be a minimum of 3 meters between the closest and 6 meters between the furthest men. With them battling to breathe and in excruciating pain, they would not have been able to talk to each other over the noise of the crowd. Therefore, they would have had to be within less than 2 meters of each other to have the conversation they did. It is written, "It was the preparation day, and the Judeans did not want the bodies on the upright. So they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies removed. The soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man, then the legs of the other. When they came to and saw that he was already dead, they didn't break his legs." Now let's look at the numbers in John's scripture. Bodies we know means 3 men. Stauros is singular for 1 upright. So we have 3 men on 1 upright. It is highly unlikely that the Romans would have gone through the trouble to plant such a huge single stake, so it must have been a tree. It's also highly unlikely that if there was 3 crosses, that the soldiers would have walked past YAHUSHUA between the 2 men and gone back to him to break his legs. They must have walked around the tree to break the 2 men's legs first before they got to YAHUSHUA. The Greek word used to describe the execution is san storo pentos, which not only means that the 2 criminals were simply with him, but that both of them were also executed together with him on the same living tree. Luke, an accountant, gave detailed descriptions in his writings, and he uses the same word for together. It is written, 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, there they executed him, together with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Neither Luke or anyone else mentions a cross, let alone 3 crosses, as an execution device, until the pagan Roman Catholics over 400 years later, showing a clear intention of the pagans to pervert the word by including their demonic gods in a book called the Bible, which turned the Messianic believers into pagan Christians and have them bowing down to pagan gods. Let's have a look at the symbolic meaning of YAHUSHUA being executed on a living tree. The tree of life was considered by the early Jews to have been the almond tree, and still today that's how the Jews depict the execution of YAHUSHUA. Early Messianic believers considered the tree on which YAHUSHUA was executed as being the tree of life. Symbolically, the real fruit of the tree of life is represented as the flesh of the Messiah, as in John 6:51-58. YAHUSHUA was the actual edible part that all people must consume in order to inherit everlasting life. The Greek word exulon was used to refer to the execution tree. In contrast, the Greek word dendron, which refers to a living tree primarily known for its fruit, was never used in this way. YAHUSHUA became the known fruit on the tree of life. It is indeed significant that the Greek word exulon means a living tree, and not a Roman cross. It is also used to refer to the tree of life in the book of Revelation. It is written, "He who has an ear, let him hear what Ruach says to the congregation. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of Elohim." And on either side of the river was the tree of life, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and may enter by the gates into the city. I hope that you've learned something from this teaching, and that you're looking forward to the next part of Nothing Happened on the Cross. Shalom.